everyone, it's Dragonrider, and time to get into some more Theorycrafts, one of my favorite, if not my favorite class, Hunter, and I am so excited for this. I've got some sweet decks to show you in this video. The first one is mine, and it has a bit of similarity to what we've seen before. Probably we'll still call it Big Beast Hunter, and maybe it's a meme, but some of the cards are just so cool. So let's check this out. All right, so yes, I'm still probably going to call this Big Beast Hunter, maybe Big Dreams Hunter, but this deck has a ton of top end. As you can see, a lot of big minions here, and then some actually hefty early game to compensate for the big top end. Because we have to live. If we're going to play this, we have to make sure that we're going to live long enough to get to the big things. The new stuff that I really want to focus on is things like this Big Dreams that's going to summon your highest cost beast from your hand and turn it dormant for 2 turns. And then you have the Mr. Mukla. Of course, it's a legendary, so we only have 1 in here. And then Stranglethorn Heart is the other legendary. It's a pretty cool spell, tradable, and you can resurrect all friendly beasts that cost 5 or more that have died. So the other beast is a Banjosaur. Now, for this Theorycraft, I only put 1 in here and not both copies, just because it being at 10 mana is so expensive. I really want to discount this and pull it out of my hand with Big Dreams, things like that, or just somehow like bring it onto the board. Maybe that is a 2 include, and not just a 1 of, but just to see how it goes, I'll probably start with 1. Then of course you have the King Crush that's going to be in core, and Hydrolodon. We still have Colossals. This is a fantastic beast. Then I thought, well, how about I just put in a little bit more? And Shadehounds are pretty great. If you infuse with 3 beasts, it does have to be 3 beasts that die to infuse this. It gains Rush. But the kind of cool thing, I think, with the Shadehounds and giving this Infuse and Rush, then you can play that Rush minion. And because the card infuses and actually changes, if you bring that back with like the Stranglethorn Heart, it will be that Rush version because that essentially became a new card. It became a card with Rush. So that's kind of a cool interaction. And I figured, well, I don't want to put a bunch of small beasts in the deck to try to get those to die off before, like, hopefully a turn 5 playing it on curve. But the wild spirits are beasts, and you don't have to play those. And then they don't cost 5 themselves either, so they're not going to kind of clutter up the res pool for Stranglethorn Hearts, which I think is a super cool interaction. So with Spirit Poachers and the Wild Spirits, I think you could still try to get a bit of like early game beasts that can die. I'm hoping that 2 Spirit Poachers and 2 Wild Spirits is enough of getting the beasts to be able to actually play a Rusher Shadehound, but we'll see on that. I'm maybe not convinced, but we'll see. But I do have some other early game minions because, again, I want to be able to still play stuff and be able to survive. And one new minion that I think is super cool is this Thornmantle Musician. It's 1 mana and it's a 1/3 and has Finale, so I think it'll be pretty easy to actually get that Finale effect. It'll be at 1 mana especially pretty easy to kind of fill in some of these curves. And if you drop it on 1, you get the Finale. And it's just the next beast that you summon is going to get that effect. So dropping something later, Shadehound or Mukla or something else is going to get that effect. And it seems pretty great. I have heard that that type of effect won't work with dormant things like these Wild Seeds. So that's definitely something that I will be looking for when I get to play and start testing this deck. Maybe when I watch the Theorycraft streams. Just to see if anybody sees that interaction, but it might not actually buff the Wild Seeds, which makes your later game beasts a little better, I think. So that seems great. A couple other early game minions, Slither Spear, another 1 mana 1/3, seems pretty solid. We're getting to keep Doggy Biscuit. That's going into core. It's being put into the core set. So that's a fantastic tool for Hunter with that tradable effect or being able to buff. If you get that great curve of one of these 1-cost minions into a Doggy Biscuit, fantastic. Giving one of your wild seeds or a big beast that doesn't have rush if you trade it off, also great. So a lot of use there. And then just a single tour guide. Now, tour guide making your next hero power cost 0. I just kind of wanted to play Dragonbane. Now, I'm not sure if Dragonbane really does fit in this deck, but I think there could be some sort of this is your mid game if you draw it, or kind of fill in one of your turns, like turn 5, 6, 7 or something. If you're not finding your big beasts, then at least you can do this. It's the 4 slot is feeling a little weird to me for Hunter because, especially in a big beast like this, we did lose some important tools. I didn't want to put in the Asharan Saber that does have rush, and the Death Rattle puts the Sunken Saber on the bottom of the deck because, again, that's a beast. It's not going to get summoned by Stranglethorn Heart, but there's not really anything that I feel like I'm doing necessarily with the Dredge to be able to get that, except for potentially the Harpoon Gun. Now, maybe the Saber is a better option than Dragonbane for this deck. Again, that is one thing that I want to test with this. I want the big beasts. I don't really want this Saber. Now, the other kind of thing, I guess, is that I put these selective breeders in to discover copies. And again, that could be either good or bad for the Saber. So maybe, but I love Dragonbane so much, so I had to put it in here. I had to put it in. It might not fit in this deck, and maybe we want Saber instead, but I love Dragonbane way too much. It's a fantastic card. I loved it before, and definitely will be putting it in some decks for sure, but maybe this is not the deck for it. But I had to just throw it in there. But speaking of the Harpoon Gun, now the Harpoon Gun, of course, can hopefully find you. It will have that dredge effect, and then hopefully find you a beast that you can discount. You get to play some of those big beasts earlier in the game. And I also decided to put Hope of Quel'Thalas in here as well, just to buff all of the beasts, because when you attack with this, they get the buff no matter where they are. So even if they're still in the deck, and if they get that buff and they're still in the deck, this also works really well with this Faithful Companions to discover a beast from the deck and summon it. And then if you have 10 mana, you'll also get a copy. So you can hopefully be, getting copies of like a buffed up King Crush or buffed up like Mukla or Banjosaur that have rush. So I just thought that might be a cool interaction. I hope this all is not too slow, which is why I tried to buff up the deck. I tried to bulk it up, right, with some early game 1-drops, some of those wild seeds and things like that. But the reason I also decided to try this Hope of Quel'Thalas along with the 2 Harpoon Guns is this new neutral instrument tech that draws you a weapon. And a specific tutor effect like that for a weapon like Harpoon Gun is so good. I cannot believe that's going to be a potential, because especially if you get that on curve, if you play Instrument Tech on turn 2, and then you can play Harpoon Gun on turn 3, and then potentially play a beast on turn 5 or 6, fantastic curve. It's going to be so good. Now, the Hope of Quel'Thalas might actually make that more difficult, so that might be one that I take out because I want the Instrument Tech to specifically draw Harpoon Gun. But I've noticed in the past with other decks that had similar effects, most notably when I played a lot of Aggro Shaman and Elemental Shaman that were also running weapons and had that kind of tutor effect to specifically draw a weapon, which was fantastic. But there were also plenty of games where I felt like I drew those weapons and then drew the card that was supposed to draw the weapon. Sometimes that happened in the like questline aggro pirate warrior as well. So that's why I thought, you know what, maybe just having 3 is okay, because then if I draw 1 or 2 of the weapons and then the instrument tech, we're still sitting okay. So I'm really excited to try that out. And I think the instrument tech into harpoon gun for Hunter is going to be so, so good. Hunter can struggle sometimes with draw, but having that very specific draw, awesome. And then now the Doggy Biscuits and Stranglethorn Heart are 3 spells that have tradable. Plus you can draw, or get copies. Like I said, with Selective Breeder, you get copies of stuff. So I'm hoping that there's enough in this deck to keep the deck kind of cycling and keep it going without just kind of feeling like it's stuck or like you're just sitting with a large hand and can't do anything at all. So I really am hopeful for some of these cards. Big Dreams I had on my Twitter, like in my Twitter name for a long, long time, like for 2 years. It was like dragonrider, Big Dreams, like in all caps. So I'm hyped. I want this card to work so bad. But I'm interested. What do you think of this deck? Do you actually think that this deck could be a possibility? Do you think that there's other beasts that you might want in here? Let me know in the comments. And let's look at the community submitted deck here. Now, this one is from my good friend SidisiTV. If you haven't checked out his channel, he is a hunter extraordinaire. Like, he only plays hunter headquarters there. He streams on Twitch a couple times a week and is very, very active on Twitter. So I'll post his links below as well. But he also has put together this menagerie deck, and I am so excited for menagerie stuff. So I was like, Hunter and menagerie, you got me, Sid. Let's take a look here. Very low curve. Very, very low curve. I mean, things that cost 5 or more in the deck, there's only 5 of. So very low curve. So it's like an aggressive menagerie deck. But I'm very curious to look through this. Of course, this Thornmantle Musician that I also put in my deck, K9otron. And this is kind of interesting to me with the Thornmantle Musician. You wouldn't want to summon the Thornmantle Musician. You'd want to play this for the finale effect, but there's some other 1-drops, so I don't think it'll be too terrible. The other 1-drops, Annoying Fan, Click Clocker, Frequency Oscillator. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot of mechs so far. I'm wondering where the rest of the menagerie stuff is. Of course, you have Selective Breeders. You gotta have Dragonbane. Love it, love it, love it. And also running the Hope of Quel'Thalas and Hydralodon, of course. So Hydralodon feels like a complete staple at this point for Hunter. But okay, there seems to be a lot of mechs, so let's take a look. Also running Amalgam of the Deep, that's a lot of stuff. Party Animals, I love these. Definitely, this is one of the new cards that I think is going to be definitely used in specifically a lot of these aggressive menagerie decks, but even more kind of mid-range style menagerie decks. I think it'll still be pretty good. Also, the Metronome, to play a 1-cost card, and then you get to draw a 2-cost. Then you play a 2-cost, and you'll get to draw a 3, and so on. Again, I just talked when looking at my deck about the significance of draw for Hunter specifically. Some other classes have a lot of draw mechanics. Hunter doesn't really have a lot of draw and has to use things like neutral cards. And especially, I think we're losing some draw mechanics, and then some draw for Hunter just isn't that great. But also including things like this Rowdy Fan. It's a Quillbore. I love this one, especially for aggressive decks. It's got good health on it to kind of keep it alive longer, to get that, while this is a live effect. It's fantastic for aggressive decks, especially on 3. Could even coin this out on turn 2 and give something attack. It's amazing. Now, of course, the other thing could just die off, and then the +4 is irrelevant anyways, but still a really cool effect. So it looks like 2 of these. Now, Snapdragon. I love this one. It is a beast, So it works with that menagerie package, but there's also a lot of battle cry stuff in here too. I mean, the rowdy fans that we just looked at, party animal, the amalgams, the frequency oscillator, the click clocker, all battle cries. Even annoying fan is also a battle cry. So super cool. I like the potential of battle cry synergies. And of course, you have the Murlocula, which is a Murloc. So only one of these, though, which even having two of these would be okay. But it might just depend on like how tight of a list this really is. Of course, two school teachers as the Nagas. Fantastic. Being able to discover and add something is great. The Ziliax, you gotta have Ziliax. There is quite a few mechs, it does feel like, in this. Sylvanas, and the one amalgam band. This is such a fun card. I don't know. I've seen a lot of people talking about how great this card is going to be, and maybe it will, but I am not convinced because I feel like we've had effects like this before of adding those effects, and if you don't hit good ones, or if you haven't played very many, it's going to feel so lackluster. But I don't know. It's also, if your opponent is like just running something that can kill this super easily or is running silence, it's just going to feel really sad. I hope it's good. But I like this top end. This feels like a really cool top end. And I normally would have thought that Sylvanas didn't really fit in a more aggressive deck, but I've played it quite a bit in an Unholy Death Knight deck list, and it's actually felt pretty solid in that. So I'm a little less hesitant on the Sylvanas in here, honestly. Very, very interesting, though. I do really like this menagerie style. Especially this set, I kind of feel like when I've been reviewing cards and talking to other people, I've been a huge like advocate for things that kind of do something immediately. Things like rush or taunt or, dealing damage when they are played, things like that. But this deck doesn't have any of that. I think that there is still a ton of potential here. I'm definitely interested to try this out. I love the menagerie style. I love Hunter, and I want to try this out. So thank you so much, Sid, for this deck. And again, I'll have links for his Twitch channel and Twitter below. And if you haven't already, please check out this video where I went over Druid decks and looking at some very interesting lists for after the very important Guff leaves Standard. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.